Okay.
So you can take a quick look at that and circle what you want. Put your name next to your circle each place.
Sure.
I'll be back later.
working. We don't know why. My name is Steve Worthington. I'm the mayor of University Place, and I call the November 7th, 2022 University Place City Council meeting to order. And with that, we'll start with the roll call.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Keel,
Councilmember Keel, present.
Councilmember Wood,
Councilmember Wood, present.
Councilmember McCluskey,
Councilmember McCluskey here.
Councilmember Fleming,
Councilmember Fleming here.
Councilmember Belisi,
Councilmember Belisi here.
Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa,
Present.
and Mayor Worthington.
Mayor Worthington, present.
Mayor,
Thank
you
you.
have
And
a
we're going to
quorum.
start from there on to the Pledge of Allegiance. And tonight, it's my honor to do that. If you would rise with me and pledge. Thank you. And I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Mayor, this is Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa. I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
This is Councilmember Belisi. I second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. All those are there any objections to the agenda as being approved as distributed? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. We can now move on to public comments. And Em, if you'd like to explain our how we do public comments here tonight.
Yes, Mayor. For the public, this is an opportunity for you to address the council on matters that are not included in the public hearing. You have 3 minutes to address the council. When you go up into the front, please state your name and your address for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
And with that, we would invite anyone who would like to make comment tonight for the council to step forward. And have a seat.
This mic does not work.
We believe it is. The green light is on? Yeah, okay, good.
No, there you
There
go.
we are.
Good? Can you hear me?
Yes, well.
Before I begin, Mr. Mayor, I know we got off to the wrong foot the last time, and I apologize for that. I'm sorry. Also, I would like to wish you and all the council members success tomorrow at the ballots for Proposition 1. I certainly voted for it, and many of our homeowners are watching today. There's 400 voters down where we live, and I'm hoping that they'll vote for it as well. I mean, who doesn't want more police, right? So good luck on the ballot polls tomorrow for that. My name is Steve Zelt. I live at 663 160th Street West. Honorable Mayor, council members, in the matter of the detention pond that we spoke of at the last meeting, I'm afraid that not only has the city treated Harvest Ridge HOA unjustly, the city has also managed to add insult to injury. The city has been insisting that we bear 100% of the cost of maintaining a 6-foot public sewer pipe, even though we're not putting in 100% of the water to that pond. There are 2 other subdivisions dumping their stormwater into that Bridgeport pond, and the city has never made them pay anything towards propping up that pipe. So here's the pond, here's our HOA right here, and immediately above us to our north is another HOA called Chambers Creek Crossing. About half of their surface water empties directly into our storm drains and then continues on down until it finally pours out into the Bridgeport pond. to be accurate and to be fair, my guess is that their water makes up about 20% of the total water in the pond when it's full. But hang on. Above Chambers Creek Crossing is yet another residential neighborhood, and when their little detention pond overflows, like it does each year, I have video, and my grandson's working on it right now, I'll send it to you this week. It travels down a 32-inch pipe, and it adds its water into the water coming from the Chambers Creek Crossing HOA, along with its dirt and debris into our storm drains, and it all ends up in this 3-story deep hole by Bridgeport. Now, again, realistically, I think their water maybe contributes 5% of the total flood. But here's the thing. I was in class on the day they taught Ethics 101. And what I learned there, that is, if you have 3 parties and they're all sharing the benefit of some single resource, then it's fair that they all share in the maintenance of that resource in proportion to their usage. If one person uses a swimming pool 75% of the time, another person uses it 20% of the time, and a third person uses it 5% of the time, well, that's how you divvy up the maintenance cost. It's just sort of common sense. But it seems like the city missed school on that day. And that has unintended consequences. One consequence is because the city discriminates against us, it depresses our property values. Our annual homeowner fees are artificially too high. Conversely, because the city discriminates in favor of Chambers Creek above us, it increases their property values. Their annual fees are artificially lower because their fees don't reflect the true cost of living there. Because the city is forcing our HOA to subsidize them.
Mr. Zelk, I believe I heard the timer go off a few moments ago. I was saying I believe I heard the timer go off a few moments ago. Are you near the end?
I am. So here's what I want to say. I feel like our HOA really doesn't like that very much. And I want to keep it real, but I want to keep it polite. Now, I'll finally end with this, by the way. That second subdivision that's up there, that top one, the tippy top, guess who owns that detention pond? Guess whose water that is? That belongs to the city of University Place. So University Place is charging us downstairs, and when we get upstairs, they're charging us again. Council members, we're asking you to straighten all that out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zelk. Appreciate hearing your comments. Any other comments this evening? Any others? Okay. In which case, then we're going to close our public comment session and move on to our consent agenda. And I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as proposed.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
This is Councilmember Belisi. I second.
We have a primary motion and a second to approve the agenda. Are there any objections to approve the consent agenda? Are there any objections to the approval of the consent agenda? I'm not seeing any. The consent agenda is approved as distributed. That brings us to our public hearing this evening, where we're going to be having a public hearing in a moment on the 2023-2024 biannual budget. And we will have a presentation from Leslie Whitesdale, our finance director. However, I'm just checking on our public comment method. So we, at this point, we'll be taking comments either from a telephone number if it is shown in, it's not shown on our live broadcast. So comments are really for people in the room at this particular point. All right, very good. Thank you. So, Ms. Blaisdell, would you like to start us on our process?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Leslie Blaisdell, Finance Director. Tonight is our second public hearing on the 2023-2024 proposed biennial budget. We've had study sessions already on October 3rd and October 17th, and we have another one later this evening. And we've had two public there are three, this is the second of three public hearings scheduled to give our citizens an opportunity to provide comments and feedback on the budget process. Tonight, this public hearing will focus on the expenditures, which were studied at the last meeting. The budget is a balanced and fits the following conservative financial assumptions for city budgets. The operations budget is at core service levels. Staffing remains at 2022 levels with no new positions added in the biennium. CIP is at core service levels using local dollars to leverage grants, and our debt payments are budgeted according to the city's debt schedule. The forecast has been updated, and I've included that on page 2 of the budget public hearing memo. And we can make all of our payments and legal obligations. The forecast also includes a 2022 budget amendment, which we will be studying later this evening to take advantage of being able to use REIT funds for maintenance costs. The legislature provided temporary financial flexibility, but that is already built into this budget forecast. Moving on to page 3, the expenditure budget is a status quo budget with a modest level of inflation assumed for supplies and services. A 6.5% COLA for staff is included in 2023 and 2024, and estimated increases to benefits are included in the budget. The memo includes the operating expenditures by department. Sorry, I forgot my other notes here. And you can see that it shows a bit of a jump in 2023, but that is mostly tied to the contingency amount. That contingency amount of $1.5 million includes the $1.1 million in one-time monies that council will be studying beginning in the first quarter of 2023 for allocation. Most of the departments have some slight changes. You'll see a difference in the city manager budget, but that's because the deputy city manager's budget used to be separate. We've combined that into one budget. And so, let's see. And then the community events budget is pretty much on par with what was budgeted for 2022, just some increases for projected price increases on items needed. And then there are some new item requests that were included in the budget that total $290,840 for some content creator, increased special overtime, and various projects and equipment needed. Additionally, it includes $10,000 for community grants pursuant to our budget policies. This appropriation gets reauthorized every year. Historically, both Tacit and Crystal Judson Family Justice Center are budgeted to receive $3,000, and an additional $4,000 is included in the budget for any new requests that may be brought to City Council. Each year, Tacit and Crystal Judson provide us with a report of services prior to us remitting the payment. Lastly, there were some new item requests related to the 2024 council goals. I've included those in the report, but again, those will be part of your study session. They are not included in the proposed budget document. So that concludes my report for the public hearing.
Thank you. Ms. Points, Leslie, I had a quick question for you with regards to that last statement. So while the individual expenses are not included in the budget, which is to say the council goal-related expenses, there is the total of that amount has been set aside and is found available in the budget, just not committed or not appropriated, is appropriated but not committed, I guess.
Correct. The
Yeah.
$1.1 million in one-time monies is appropriated as part of the contingency, awaiting council's decision on how they prioritize and appropriate funds for their goals.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to get that straight in my head. And let's see. As far as our process tonight goes, I'm just looking to go to public comment at this point. We can, if there's some, so, Councilmember McCluskey, just a moment, I'll get your mic active. And at least I will try. But let me just specify now, if we have some further clarifying questions from council, this would be a good opportunity. Then we'll go to public comment. So, Councilmember McCluskey.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I was wondering on the Kobayashi driveway repaving, I know what repaving is, but I also understand the Kobayashi driveway goes up from the top road, swirls all the way down to the house. So are we doing all of that, and also, are we also going to shore up some of the walls to protect the roadway? Because I know there was some erosion that was happening along that road down to the home.
The primary part of that project would be mostly to resurface the pavement it's all deteriorating. Although there would be some, we don't anticipate building new retaining walls, but we would be able to add some, a little bit of drainage stuff on the side that would help control the erosion. But right now, the scope of what's concluded is 90% just really resurfacing of that road down the hill. It's quite expensive just because of the access. It'll be tricky to pave. I wouldn't want to be the paver doing work, but that's what it's included.
Right, okay, so essentially just doing another top layer over it and
Yeah.
doing that. Okay, thank you for clarifying, Jack.
Any other council-related clarifying questions for public comment? Okay, with that, I'm going to go to the public hearing portion of our meeting and invite the public to make comment on the 2023-2024 budget. And by the way, this is one of two hearing opportunities we have this evening. We will also have November 21st as another public hearing, and at the conclusion of our hearing today, we'll continue for that purpose. Are there any members of the public that would like to make comment now? I'm not seeing any. So with that, I will continue the hearing until November 21st. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Jack. And it's now time for our reports. City Manager Zuck, do you have anything to report this evening?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I'm happy to report that today demolition began on the Red Apple building, that building complex that had been vacant for quite a long time in a state of disrepair. The developer that owns that property and plans to redevelop it has taken that first big step. It's a milestone. I know that you have heard from many members of the community wanting to know when something was going to happen. I'd say this is a pretty significant event today, and it sets the stage for the redevelopment of that 8-acre parcel. So stay tuned. There will be more information about the projects that will be going forward on that site. But I just wanted to make note of that. And we also had a film crew down there to record the demolition. So watch for that on YouTube.
Great. Well, thank you. Certainly very good news. Something we've all been looking for. We had a little warm-up session with our council to remove, take a few chips out of the building. It was good. Good to do. Very, very helpful. So I would then entertain Councilmember Keel. Do you have any comments you'd like to make tonight?
Great. Thank you, Mayor. I have no comments this evening.
Very good.
I know everyone's shocked, but
And Councilmember Wood, how about yourself? Would you like to make a comment?
I just have one comment. Tomorrow's Election Day. I strongly support Proposition 1, and I hope our community will as well. So get out there and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McCluskey.
Well, I ditto Councilmember Wood's comment, especially get out there and vote. And there's several important issues and also positions. So it's always important not to just give away your vote by not voting, making it known that, you have that right and that privilege to go forth and do it. I always believe that if you can make that decision, don't give that decision away to somebody else, make it yourself. So, and I'm also excited about the 27th and Grandview demolition. It's been years and years and years that that's been a total blight, and I am so thrilled and happy that that is now gone, and that we can move on and regenerate and rejuvenate that our third node of our regional growth center. That's very important for the whole synergy of the 27th business district. And I would also like to thank Mr. Sugg and his staff for being diligent, and also not only diligent in getting it to the resolution that it is to this date, because it's been long and arduous for your team, but also to when you had to go in there, as well as with our police services, to take care of the nuisance issues that he had evolved over the years. So I do appreciate all of that. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just two quick things. One is a reminder to council and citizens on this Friday is the dedication of the Veterans Plaza over at Cirque Park. That's at 11 a.m. as I recall the time. Long awaited, and certainly kudos to the city staff and all the others that have put a lot of effort into making this come to fruition. So looking forward to that. And then to echo the comments of everyone else, tomorrow is Election Day. Regardless of your beliefs or parties or whatever, just it's a right that we have. It's a right that we've all earned. Get out and vote, and do what you believe is right, but vote, please. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Belisi.
No comments at this time, thank you.
And Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa.
Thank you, Mayor. Each one of you council members have received the emails from me for my reports in my work with the PCRC, as well as the PCRC work group working on the processes for applying for grants, and my reports on the PRSC Executive Board as well. The one highlight that I would ask you to really pay attention to is the PSRC report. It's really amazing the amount of billions of dollars over the next several years that will be invested in the Puget Sound region through PSRC, and how that gets distributed over the years to the counties, which then of course impacts us as a city, will be determined here in the next couple of years through a process that they have, PSRC has, to determine how to best distribute those funds based on federal restrictions and so forth. So it is of huge importance, whether it's me, but certainly should be somebody in this council that takes, whoever's on the PCRC, they should take a very active role in the PSRC, if possible, to get appointed, because that's where our chance is to have a real voice when it comes to being at the table, what they call a task force that they create during that time to determine how that's all going to happen. It's something we need to pay attention to. I'll do my best to bring this forward. Whoever, if I don't, there's appointments coming up for this month from the PCRC to the PSRC. And unfortunately, I didn't know this when I got appointed early this year, but it's only for 1 year, which is really unbelievable because it takes a year. Just it's taken me this whole year to really get it where I could understand it and convey what is important to us here. So I'm hoping I will volunteer to stay on there. Hopefully I'll get appointed. If not, I certainly, as a whole council, I'm going to say we better pay attention and be active. There is a public process for us as a city to comment in a very significant way at the PSRC level. And I think that if we don't have a representative like myself or someone else to be appointed there, then we should take that active role. It's going to be that critical. it would mean hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to our city. That being said, the reports are in, and hopefully you'll have fun going through them, pick and choose what you like. The other one is I want to comment on Councilmembers Fleming's on the Veterans Day Plaza. And I did have a conversation with staff, specifically with Steve Sugg, our city manager, in regards to that and my one-on-one. And that was that I think that not only on that, but also like the inclusive playground, it's a huge effort. I'm very proud, and we as a city are very fortunate to have a group of people that are willing to step up in a very significant way to see it tooth and nail to the end. And I think that we need to go step up our game a little bit. And when we have a group like that, that literally brings to this community a very significant, and I'm not talking about just a little cleanup or a little paint job here and there to make a big deal about it, but when we have what I consider a major project, a significant project in our city, for many to enjoy, it's not very, it's inclusive, exclusive, that we should do something beyond just thanking them or whatever. I think that we should maybe, for example, film him, ask our staff, our administration to do a film of all those of the group, mention them, what they did, so that the public out there can see who these people are that was the force behind. And each one of these, they were actually the force. We weren't the force. We were secondary to them. And so I believe that we should do something like that, do a very clear story and photo and naming each individual on our website for a while. We should bring them here and recognize them. So those are the kind of things that I'm thinking of, that I think that I hope that all of you will chat on your one-on-ones with the city manager, and hopefully he and the staff will come to us with a plan on how we can recognize such as great groups that we have. And so anyway, I wanted to get your attention on this. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Appreciate those comments and thoughts. Well, and then it's my turn. Likewise, very excited about the Veterans Plaza and its dedication coming up here. 11/11 at 11, like the original Armistice Day some 103 years ago. So, it's going to be a real point of pride in our community, and I'm very glad that our community can host this and help the volunteer group that's worked so long to put this together. And it looks like it's been a wonderful job. And it's been a great partnership, I think, with our staff doing a portion of the work, and the volunteer group essentially directing that and filling in the gaps. It's been very good. So I look forward to Friday very, very much, and I hope people can join us there as well. It'll be a wonderful community event, and it'll be maybe an hour, maybe less. So I also wanted to share with council, we just heard today that the Pierce County ARPA sewer infrastructure funding grant, the city of University Place has been awarded $500,000 in our sewer project for that. This is for the 57th Street sewer project. So congratulations to our team for putting that together, and it moves us yet another big step forward in our sewer infrastructure needs in the community, and appreciate Pierce County's partnership as we move forward with the infrastructure needs and helping the environment, the economy, and the future for the community with proper infrastructure. A couple of other items. One would be, just heard that we have our, periodically we have the Public Facilities District board member position that comes up for renewal. Kevin Bursky, I guess, has been filling in on that for the last few years. If council has a particular interest in serving, let me know. We probably are going to make a fairly quick appointment on this. It just as a reminder, This group typically meets once a year to identify some finances and then sort of moves on. Those meetings are by Zoom, at least currently. And it really goes back to funding the convention center in Tacoma as how that thing got started. But if probably by the end of the year, we might be ready to make a quick appointment on that, unless I hear someone wants to take some time with that. Speaking of appointments, we have 8 commission openings. We have 9 applications, and the Mayor Pro Tem, along with Councilmember Fleming and I, will start interviews over the next few weeks and work out a recommendation to bring to the council for your consideration and ratification here first of the year. And with that, I did want to say as well, please vote. It's how the system works and how it operates, and everyone should be, if you want to really make a difference, this is how you make a difference, is with your vote. That's the honest facts about it. So, thank you, and with that, I'm going to wrap up comments, and we're going to move into our study session, where Leslie Blaisdell, our Finance Director, gets to come back, and we get to talk more about budget. So, Leslie, please help us and join us.
Thank you.
Study session.
So tonight is our third and final study session for the budget. We've already studied revenues and expenditures, and tonight we focus on capital improvement projects. Pursuant to our budget policies, we'll review the projects tonight. I've included the policy in the memo, but I'm not going to read that to you. We'll just get right to page 2, and we'll start with the Parks CIP. The 23-24 proposed budget includes 8 projects in the Parks CIP. All of these have a portion that can be funded with Parks impact fees, and the remainder right now is scheduled to be funded with REIT monies. The first one is Adriana Hess, which is a boardwalk over the pond. We have 3 projects which probably at the time that they're done, I understand, will be combined into one, but we've broken it down into detail for you. The community center master plan, a space plan for the gravel lot, and splash pad design. At Sunset Terrace Park, a retaining wall. Creekside Park master plan, Paradise Pond Park master plan, as well as an ingress-egress parking plan. Jack has provided a description in the memo of each of the projects, and the total is $515,000, again with $257,500 coming from Parks impact fees, and the remaining $257,500 coming from REIT. So, before I move on, are there any questions on the Parks CIP?
I think we're, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Leslie, before REIT came about, where you could assist with this, I remember that when we received a grant like that, we completed the cost of that through the form of staff work. So is any of the staff work being given any credit toward that, so we don't take as much out of REIT?
Often the grants, so it depends on the grant source. So some of them we can just use straight kind of, in-kind services, but other it's more, it kind of has to be spread across the board, even deal. So for our budgeting, we have not backed out staffing costs. So there theoretically is some. Often we'll have, if we can, we look at it almost as a bonus. If we're able to charge staff time to the grant, it ultimately is a savings to our bottom line. We realize that in year-end savings usually, but that's the way that makes the grant agencies happier as compared to doing it upfront.
So can we add can we add any staff credit to any of these projects so that less REIT money is utilized?
Yeah, and the only thing, we certainly could look at it from the, we put it in our applications to show that we're doing that, but from I think the easiest way just to do it is to do it at as a year-end kind of savings kind of thing, just because it also gives us a little bit, it's a more conservative way to budget the way Leslie has it proposed.
If I
But
heard-
we could back it out, but it makes it a little, the bottom line a little thinner, I guess. if
And
it makes sense.
understand, so if I heard you correctly, you would still do that, meaning provide staff credit, but you would do it at the end of the process, not in it like now, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but you will at the end.
Yep.
Which supposedly, if that works out well, there could be less REIT money being utilized overall, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yep, that's
good enough.
correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Keel.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Leslie, thanks for the presentation. And Jack, I'm glad you're there. I see where we've got the master plan, where we're spending money on master plans, and also the Paradise Pond ingress, egress parking plan. And looking at the notes, it's tied to a master plan too as well. So is there, I mean, that's obviously just planning documents. This is what we think we're going to do. Is there a thought for how, or, after we get the plan together, how we're going to actually come up with the dollars to actually do the work? What's the plan there, to play on the words?
And a lot of that will be fleshed out with the planning effort itself, but the idea is then we'll be able to use what we identify for the various components, and then hopefully take that to maybe look for other funding sources, whether it's a grant or something else, depending on, we may even have to, some of these are big enough, like if we're talking about the Paradise Pond or Creekside, the big things, and it may be segments, kind of like we did the application recently for the RCO grant application for the current apple orchard, where we did some stuff for a playground and some access improvements. So it may not be a whole bite of the apple at one time, or take a little bite of the apple, not the whole thing at once. But that's hopefully the master plan, a component of that will be identify what we want and then compartmentalize it in segments that we could hopefully then market for various grant sources.
Great, thank you. And my follow-up question, and you kind of walked me right into it. When I look at the Cirque Park, where there's three pieces there, so obviously that's chunks. We're taking things in chunks. And are there other pieces to Cirque Park that we're going to need to actually, before it's totally done? And then Adrian has the same thing. We've got this boardwalk over the pond. Are there other pieces in Adrian Hess that work that needs to be done?
For the master plan, we have the Adriana Hess, starting with that one. That one's been kind of already fleshed out. It's more the kind of the getting the companion work to, applications, grant applications for that. On the Cirque Park, it's obviously such a big one. It's this one right now is really just focused on what we're going to do at that the big gravel area off to the one side. So that's what these three projects are, and they're really going to be one effort, but they're three components of that, of what can be done in that one location. So I had a vision, although we do have a general master plan for Cirque Park, there's other, it's so big when you have Cirque, and then we're kind of in the back. And then similar, now you see like the Creekside, the dollar amount there is much bigger because it's a blank slate. And so that plan is going to be where Cirque Park is already fleshed out a bit and we're more focused. This is a wide open study, and so you're going out to the public and doing a lot of things. So that one is going to be the full, kind of whole enchilada, so to speak. And then the other two kind of components of what we have.
Yeah.
But
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor. I am really excited to see that boardwalk over the pond for Adriana Hess. That's been a vision, once again, long time coming. And how I envision it, it would be more like Snake Lake, especially if you design the other side, the Paradise Pond with the master site plan and getting that so that it's an integral setting and with the Audubon Society there, it mirrors a very popular site of Snake Lake in University Place. So I'm for educational programming, would encompass not only where it's currently at, but also they could transition it out into the other side as well. So when that site is designed out, sort of think of the ancillary and complementary components to that, because right now, it's very popular place for people to walk their dogs, and of course, dogs and birds may not always get along.
Yeah.
So try to figure out how you can marry that together so that everyone can get their needs met in that site, but also on the forefront of that to think about the wildlife that's there, and also the history of that side of Paradise Pond, where there was a home, to capture that history and maybe with the kiosk, so that when people come, they can really appreciate what it has been and then what it is now, and how to respectively use that side of the park, sort of preserve-ish sort of feeling to that.
Yeah.
My other comment is, it's really cool you're doing the Creekside Master Site Plan, because we have these open, like you said, it's an open canvas that we can create and do. So I'm really be excited to see what happens with that adventure and coming back to the use. Cirque Park is a park that I look at as an active use sort of park. And to think of the active use sites that will bring people in there for like the volleyball, the soccer, the baseball, of course, the skate park, and all of those things will make it a very lively and fun place to be for families and for people just to see different activities. I remember my grandfather way back when he would walk for about a mile or so he could see Little League games, and he didn't have anybody playing, but just because there was activity there for him to see, and I could see that, evolving in our city, and also, key maybe tournament plays that, Councilmember Keel had envisioned at one time. And also to think about pickleball. I've been following pickleball and reading up on it, and it's exploding.
It is.
I don't think it's gonna go away.
Yeah.
So think about maybe a little space that I've seen courts that were tennis courts that also could be transitioned into pickleball. So it's a multifunctional use sort of thing. But if you've ever been by the Salt Park, especially on a Saturday morning, it's packed with pickleballers going out there and playing. So I think, to think about all the up and coming trends that are not just fads, but are solid trends. And I think pickleball is one of them as well.
Yeah.
And maybe a little half-court basketball court out there, too.
I'll see.
Let's see, what else could I think of? Thank you.
Yep.
No go-karts. Ignore
Any other-
Councilmember Fleming on that comment. It's an active, but it's not a motorized activity park.
Other comments at this point in terms of this park CIP as for study session? I guess from my perspective, all good ideas, and it looks like a good project. Series of projects, actually, and some of it is quite exciting. I get a little concerned sometimes that we focus too much on CERT in my own mind. We have other parks, and we end up with a perhaps much loved and perhaps overly loved park. It's nice to distribute assets as well. But that's all part of the park planning process, not really part of the CIP, so anyhow. All right, well, shall we move on to the next CIP piece,
We'll
which is
move on
Public
to
Works?
page 3, which is our Public Works CIP. There are 4 projects included in the proposed budget. All projects are consistent with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan and are included in the city's 6-year TIP. We have the 35th Street Phase 2 project, 67th Avenue Phase 2, Chambers Creek Road. That is a project increase. That's a project that has already been started, I believe. and then the 40th Street Phase 3. Listed on the chart is the project cost and the various funding sources, the grant funding, the surface water management fee contribution, and the REIT contribution. And I'll let you ask Jack any questions you have about those projects.
Council questions? Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Leslie, while I was going through stuff previously, one of the things that kind of jumped out at me is earlier in the year, the council had a conversation about citywide kiosks, which is really in the public works realm. I know there was some preliminary work done in that area, and then we were supposed to talk about it about this time of year when we started talking budget. Whatever became of that?
So my
Like the
recollection,
wayfinding?
don't we have a
The
wayfinding
wayfinding
proposal?
signs?
Huh? Yeah.
The wayfinding?
The wayfinders.
That
Yeah.
is listed, they've done a piece of it, I believe, and then remaining is on the council goals related
Yes.
Okay.
So we're-
list.
All right.
We'll see that or hear that at the retreat and find out the proposal and see what council wants to do.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Keel.
Thank you, Mayor. I just, no question, I just have a comment. I'm very excited to see this 67 Phase 2 on here. When I saw between Bridgeport and Cirque, I was thinking north, and I was like, no, go south. So you're talking about from Fred Meyer up to where Cirque is,
Yep.
right? That is fantastic. I mean, that it's heavily walked with the school and the people that live over there on the west side of that road, and there's no sidewalks. There's no. I mean, it's gonna be beautiful. So I'm real excited about that.
Other comments? Councilmember Wood.
Actually, that just generated another question. So north of Cirque, is that Phase 3 then?
Yes.
'Cause
So,
there's-
yeah,
yeah,
Phase
between-
1 is here by, which is going to come after Phase 2, just the way the funding came. So Phase 2 will be first, which is Bridgeport to Cirque. Phase 1 is Regents to 40th, and then Phase 3, which we do have design money for, a grant for that we got this year, and that's between then 40th, actually 44th and Cirque, because between 40th and 44th is essentially already done.
Okay, thank you.
Very nice.
Yeah, so, very good. Other comments from council on this one? I have a couple. So 67th Avenue, yeah, that does get a lot of use, and glad to see it's moving forward as well. So that's very good. There was another item that we spoke of in this year's retreat, and I don't know if it's on our goal list, or if it belongs here, or it fell off the table, or whatever, so that's why I raise it. It is the potential, it is putting together a program where we would install battery backup systems on our traffic control lights, and adopting related standards, and, X number of years, we have the lights replaced. Is that any place, or is that going to be a different budget proposal to work
I
through?
know we have it for, is it on the goals?
It's on the goals? Okay.
I can't read lips very well. So it's, I know that we're applying for grants for that. That's been a
Okay.
focus for emergency management
Good enough.
stuff.
Thank
But,
you. I don't need to take
think
too
that's
much more
kind of-
time, that's just, Santa wanted to get that out and off. Great. Anything else before we move on to municipal facility CIP? If not, then we're there. So,
Okay. Lastly, we have our municipal facilities. There are 3 projects that are included in the proposed budget, and one on this list that came about after we put the budget together. As you know, we had the opportunity with the delay in the pickup trucks we had ordered earlier this year to change that order to electric vehicles and start transitioning a bit more to electric, but that has made it so that we need to put some chargers in down at the Public Works shop so they can keep those running. And we were able to get costs in, and that's $35,000 additional that, as long as there are no objections, we would include in the final budget numbers when we bring that back to you on the 21st. So we have a Public Workshop sewer rebuild, a parking lot entry upgrade at Public Workshop, and the chargers I just spoke of, and then the parking meters in the town center area that have been discussed. They were discussed prior to the pandemic, and with the pandemic, it was delayed, so it is back on in the budget numbers. So if you have any questions about any of the Muni CIP projects.
Any questions on Public Works CIP? I have one, but,
Just,
so Councilmember McCluskey.
yeah, just one on the parking meters. When I understand the need for that, for their rotation, and will that come before council as far as, you know, the procedures or recommendations from with the cost? And because I know there's been some discussion on that, what works best, and you guys been investigating this.
Yep.
So I'll be before you know, pull the plug on this to bring it back, so you can get a first preview on that. And I appreciate it.
And that'll also include what we're getting, and we'll get a report on what we're hearing from the businesses too, because a lot of this is really driven by what we're hearing from the businesses. So we'll bring
Right.
that forward too, so you know what we're hearing from them.
Okay.
And then also, I would envision, because if we do the step of the parking meters, it will also include a public education component. And so that also will be brought forward before we do any of those things, so that you know what our plans for that would be.
Right, and let them know that there is free parking
Yep.
in our parking garage. Right, we just want to keep that flow going in the front end of the Market Square. All right, thank you.
Just, Councilmember Keel, then Councilmember Woods, then Mayor Pro Tem, then Councilmember Fleming. So, Councilmember Keel.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And like Councilmember McCluskey, I'm very much interested in the parking meters. I'm glad it's back. I know we were just like right on the edge of pulling the trigger, and then we didn't. And so, and I know that there are businesses out here very much keenly interested in making sure that we have something like that to help with turnover and with customer flow and so stuff like that. So as we talk with them and as we talk amongst ourselves, it'd be good to get that back on track so that, you know, we can get that done. The question I have, Mayor, and I think I'm just looking at you, is around the EV chargers. And when I asked the question, it's going to be down at the shop, but it's for those shop vehicles to charge them and stuff like that. So, and you know, with all these EV vehicles kind of springing up all over, I really would be interested in some kind of a thought of what we want to do as a city. I mean, there's some businesses have them. I know. I'm thinking of.
Yeah, we do.
The name of the company just went out of my head.
Are you thinking of
The
Tesla?
drugstore, right?
Walgreens.
Walgreens.
Walgreens, that's it,
Walgreens,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, so I know that they have some, and then there's some in other places. I know we have them in our own parking garage. So I'm interested in just kind of maybe circling that around again and just kind of having a more circumspect plan or thought about how we want to manage that.
Yes, so let's see if we can't find a little bit of time to discuss that and put together a more comprehensive vision about what's happening with that. There are a number of pieces to it at this point. Good idea.
Thank you, Mayor.
And related to that, I know Lisa is looking into, there are some federal programs that maybe be able to take advantage on some sort of like citywide charging stations and so forth. So we are looking at that. So we're hoping that there may be some opportunities there as well.
Yeah, Tacoma Power has programs for both residential and commercial businesses for EV chargers, as a matter of fact. So, Councilmember Wood.
Just a quick question for you. So on the EV chargers again, was there, I know we're getting electric vehicles because we have environmental goals as a city and a county that we're trying to meet. Does this pencil out, do we gain anything over the life cycle of a vehicle as far as in fuel costs or anything that we're not spending by going to electric? Has there been any analysis done on that?
Yes.
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 Can I get the short answer?
Both in terms of fuel cost and your maintenance cost is significantly less.
Significantly less. Outstanding. Thank you.
Councilmember, excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Leslie, is it a normal process to budget for an item, meaning the parking meters, before that requires an issue like that to be approved by the council before council action? Because we haven't taken any action, but you're already budgeting for things. That doesn't seem right to me, but, I mean, is that normal, or?
It has, it
How
is
can it be
done off
normal?
and on.
Yes, if it is
And a
normal, how-
project this size, before a contract is awarded or anything is moved on, typically comes to council. And I was asked to include it in the budget to make sure that the funding was there and that we could still maintain a balanced budget.
But why even
so-
budget it into a budget when we haven't approved anything like that, that kind of a strategy? I'm just, I don't agree with that process. I just want to tell you as a peer, it bothers me that you've already taken away from our budget from other things that have been approved and recognized as recognized by the council. That particular item, parking meters, which could be a hot item, has not even been discussed, much yet approved, and we already taken money out of the budget for it. Something, we're going to have a conversation about that. We really do, as a council, and how we want that presented to us in the future, either this one or other things, because I think that's really backwards. Maybe that's kind of a little bit heavy, but it's just bothersome.
I have a response to that before we go on to something else, but,
Councilmember Fleming, you're next up.
I'll yield.
Yeah.
okay, thank you, Councilmember. So I remember that conversation as mayor, we had a conversation with staff, and at that time, the businesses out in the town center were up in arms, and I don't mean that lightly. They were up in arms about the fact that people were parking and staying all day, and they weren't getting turnover, and a lot of them were considering leaving. They were saying that we weren't really managing stuff really well, and so that was brought in our discussion. We had a kind of a head nod conversation with council at that time and said, hey, this is coming up. We need to do something about it right now. And we asked staff to go do that, and they came up with those dollars, and we said, yes, please move forward with it. And they were moving forward with it. And it was about, they were going to do the contract, all that stuff, and of course come to us and approve everything. But the pandemic happened, as staff said, and then those things were cool. So in this case, from my perspective, staff didn't do anything ahead. They didn't get the cart before the horse. It was us doing the work with them together.
Okay, well, due all respect, Councilmember Kill, I don't agree with that analogy.
It did happen.
Well, again, we can agree to disagree.
Okay.
Because I look at it much different than what you're seeing it. I do remember that conversation, and yes, we talked about it being something that the businesses were looking forward for us to look at. We said that we would look at it, gave the nod to the council, to the administration to look into it more and farther about costs and what does that mean, survey. It didn't mean to go ahead and take money out of the budget before we even approved it or studied it based on their information.
Well, as the mayor, that's what I meant.
Yeah. I didn't see it, and that was like 4 years ago, and something like that old should be revisited before it comes out of the budget. At least a courteous study session and say, okay, this is where we're at, this is what happened. Do you guys still want to move forward, a presentation? That hasn't even been asked again. And I guess it's not that I don't agree with that, and certainly I would agree with the parking meters. That's not my issue. The issue is taking money out of the budget on something we didn't approve yet. That's my issue.
And so if I may, we're
It's
actually.
a procedural thing.
Yeah,
And that's what we're here about, budget.
Yeah, budget and process and procedure. And
Right.
actually, this is the time at which you would say, well, or do we want to include the $100,000 for that potential project in the future or not? So it seems as though this would be the timing. It's not approved yet, but that's the
Well,
process.
I have a hard time deciding that without a proper presentation and study session on it.
Okay,
That's the process.
all right. Councilmember Keel.
Thank
I'm
you,
sorry,
Mr. Mayor, but
Fleming.
I know we may look alike, but no, I'm not Councilmember Keel. But be that as it may.
Yeah.
I want to jump on a couple of issues here. One, to Councilmember Keel's point about the parking, about the electric chargers. I get it that we want to put those down at the shop. It makes sense to do that. I would perhaps say let's not be so narrow-minded because those vehicles are going to be running all over the city doing work. We perhaps may want to rethink where we put outstation a couple of more of those. So when they're in the north end of the city and the battery starts to run down, they don't have to drop their work and turn around and go back down to the shop there and recharge them. It just wouldn't meet the common sense test to do that. So I would say as we move forward, perhaps give it a little bit more thought of where we outstation some of those chargers for city vehicles. With regards to the parking meters, I'm sorry, but I have to agree with Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa on the parking meter issue. And I know we've had the one-on-ones and my concerns about that. I know when I first came on council, we had a very brief conversation about parking meters, and then it kind of went into mothballs, if you will, for multiple reasons at the time. So that was about 3 years ago. But I'll share with council what I shared with staff. When I was on the county council, I had the exact same issue with Old Town. The businesses there were up in arms over not enough turnover in parking. They were losing business. They demanded parking meters to be put in, and so we put in parking meters down in Old Town in Tacoma, down by the waterfront. 3 months later, the businesses were going bankrupt because no one would park there, and so they came back and then they demanded we take the parking meters out. So, as I requested from staff before we jump off the bandwagon and put in parking meters, because it sounds like the simple solution for turning over vehicles that are parking there all day, we really should take a step back and to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, get a study session for one and look at what are the alternatives that we have that really accomplish the objective. Parking meters is not kind of a be-all, end-all, and it's not going to solve the problem. And there may be alternatives out there we haven't even looked at. So, I think what concerns me about putting money in a budget now is it's a fait accompli without the council input, and that's my concern. Typically we put money in the budget on things that we've had extensive conversation on. The council's in agreement for the majority part of it, and we're ready to move forward. But I too have never seen money put in the budget for something that we haven't really agreed to do. So I do have some reluctance in that area, and I have some great concerns. While we're trying to solve the concerns and the problems of our businesses in Town Center, we may be doing more harm than good while we think we're doing good. So I just say we need to move forward cautiously on this one. Certainly we need to do something, no ifs, ands, or buts about that, but I'm not sure this is the right way to do it.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Fleming. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa. Let me go to Councilmember Woods, if I could, since he hasn't had much airtime yet.
So since parking meter seems to be the discussion du jour, I obviously, as a new guy, have not been part of any discussion on parking meters. I do have concerns about it, and I would love to see a study session on it as well. And I would recommend or propose the idea of taking that money that you're allocating towards parking, put it into council contingency, and then perhaps bring it up, because that falls under our business development objective as a council, at least in my opinion. And I think we should discuss this possibly further at the retreat. And just so if we just add it to contingency, that 1.1 million, make it 1.2. That would be a proposal, but whatever you think best. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Councilmember Wood. And I think something along that line of Councilmember Belisi. Oh, I'm sorry. I did say you next.
Right.
Then it'll be you.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, and I don't want to repeat myself, but I want to make myself clear. It's the process. And I didn't even realize it, but Councilmember Wood brought up a very good point, and that is 2 council members weren't here when we had that initial discussion or discussions about this whole thing, and they needed to be part of that discussion. I also don't want to set a precedent of starting budgeting on something that we discussed 4 years ago, 3 years ago, and haven't revisited. That's not, I think that when, if 3 months goes by, okay, but, that years goes by, not a year, I think that's a bad precedent. Says, well, we discussed and all that. 3 or 4 years goes by. And then the other precedent is budgeting something that we haven't approved. Those two things is a very bad precedent in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Belisi.
As I look at our study session tonight, we're talking capital improvement projects. Not one of these projects that is in this budget has been reviewed or discussed with council. It will be in the future as these projects develop. It's the same with the parking meters. But if we don't have it in the budget, it's not an item that's going to crop up out of the blue somewhere, and then the discussion is we don't have money in our budget for it, so we can't move forward. The public workshop EV chargers, the sewer rebuild, none of this has been discussed with council, but will be when we go through to initiate the contracts for these projects. We're setting aside money to look at. It doesn't mean we spend the money. We still will, as council, put the direction out there to staff of what to do. It's the same with the park CIP. We haven't discussed those projects, but we will as we develop the master site plans. But the money is there so staff can begin planning the process and begin deciding how to accomplish these goals, these items. So, we're discussing $100,000 about parking meters, but we will be discussing that process before we initiate the expenditure of it. If we develop a procedure for the parking meters, it allows us a time to look at alternatives besides parking meters. And if we as council decide we have alternatives that don't need parking meters, we got $100,000 that goes back into the budget.
Yeah.
But if we don't do it now and don't put it in the budget, then where are we going to get the $100,000 on a zero balanced budget? Just my thought.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you.
And then look this way.
Well, I, for one, peruse the Market Square quite a bit, several times a week. And there are cars that are parked there for a long time. And as a retailer, I would say I would not like that. Turn over, bring the trunk to my door, turn over, next trunk, move on, next trunk with the cash in hand, because that's the turnover rate that I need in my store, and I would like it to be reflected back in the parking. What I think is different than Old Town, they don't have a parking garage. So that would be an added incentive to encourage people to change their behavior to park in our parking garage. And as a city, it's an educational piece to make the people feel comfortable to turn that corner. So you're going, you can park in the parking garage, but I'm going to see if there's parking available here. And then they can park, or some of them are workers. They stay there for hours. They don't leave for 6 or 8 hours. And if I had one of those cars in front of my door, I would not be happy to see that same car there. Because some of this are what we're noticing in our town center is it's a stop and go, this fast food, right? We don't have a lot of, sit down, fine dining facilities. It's a turnover rate that we have. And so I think we need to look at that and see how quickly we can turn over and also change the attitude of the people that come to our Market Square for the fast and goes to journey into the parking, noticing that, okay, well, if you go around it 3 times trying to find that empty parking slot, it's better and more timely if you park and walk to wherever you're going to pick up your food. And use the app so it can be more, like Starbucks. Go in and go out. So, and I'm of the, I've seen things in the budget that the council hasn't really, pulled the trigger on. And we had a lot of robust discussions. We've added, taken away, and but I would be one that would like to have a robust discussion on the parking meters and whatever alternatives that could be there. Painting the curb yellow or green, if that really works. Does it or does it not? How is I know the downtown city of Tacoma, because of the safety factor and other things in the parking meters that are only geared for 2 hours. So if you're going down there for a nice dining, and you're going to also see the show, that's not going to work for you. So all those mix in particular to bring it to our town center to see what is that good mix that will keep our customers happy, our customers coming, and have that ebb and flow in the market. That's my comment. Thank you.
Mayor Worthington asked me to chair while he's gone, but thank you, Councilmember McCluskey. I didn't see any other hands. Okay, Councilmember Keel.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Belisi really talked a little bit about what I wanted to say, and that is when we look at and this is where my whole take was on this whole conversation. When we look at all these projects here, we do have to talk more about them. I mean, I made big hubbub about the 6th and 7th Street through Bridgeport. That's the first I even heard of this project. That's why I was so excited about seeing it in there, right? So all of these, many, if not all, of these projects are, in my view, are like that. We haven't dug into them. And so I fully expected to have another conversation about the meters, the parking meters. I mean, because it's $100,000 and it's above the city manager's signing authority, we have to act on it. Okay, so that was already in my head. My thinking is that this is something that we have talked about years ago, and we gave the go-ahead to do it. Understandably so, it's been years, and I fully expected that we would talk about it again. What I really want to make sure is that all of you, as my colleagues, don't leave this dais thinking that staff has done something wrong or staff is trying to do an end run on something. That is wrong. They're not doing that. I think they're reacting to what we've done, and there's a conversation that we have to have on meters, and we will have that conversation before it's approved.
So, thank you, Councilmember Keel. Mayor Pro Tem, you had something else you wanted to add. I wanted to add something if I could here too. Look, I think we've had a good discussion here. We've been able to clarify a few things amongst us. There's a couple of paths that I can see forward from here, and then I'm going to ask you, Mayor Pro Tem, for your comment. But the paths would be leave it as is within full anticipation. We're going to talk about this before it's expended. Move it to another path is move it to the contingency fund, add $100,000 there, again, with the anticipation we're going to talk about it before we expend it. Or you can essentially, when the time comes, not in a study session, but when the time comes, we can strike it from the budget. So those are the three that are in front of us. Mayor Pro Tem?
Just real quick, Councilmember Keel, I don't think any council member was pointed at council, at Leslie or staff that they were doing anything wrong. That was not the issue, nor was the issue that got into almost a study session here about parking meters. I think most of us think that something has to be done. Parking meter seems to be a key element of that. My beef, and I think that Councilmember Wood brought a very good suggestion, because it put in a contingency list, and then, we finished talking about it, make the approval, and we did, is there, and it can be earmarked as any one of this project. Here's the contingency list, earmarked for that, and that's what we do. It seems like because when we approve this, we're saying we approve to do that. Okay, I know you're shaking your head, but before you do, just hear me out, okay? We can agree to disagree. But I think that, and all I'm asking now, I don't know who's right or wrong. It seems like we can argue about this all night long, but it's something that I'd like to have a discussion about how we'd like to see our budget prep. And maybe Leslie can enlighten us in the future about true budgeting techniques that are permissible and legit, to do. I'm not saying that it was not legit. Obviously, you wouldn't present it to us if it was legit. So maybe there's other options on how to present it that we may like. I guess I should say it that way. And I'd like to talk about that sometime in the future, because I have a heart burn over approving a budget for an item that we haven't actually approved. So that ends my debate for this.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to be able to move us on to the next item, but I also feel as though we need to have some sort of finish line on this. So I would encourage us to move the $100,000 into the contingency fund, and we will have a future discussion about that. Jack, you have a thought?
Just to add a little bit to this, but and to both Councilmember Keel's point and Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa point, this itself is different than has been done in the past. And one thing that's different is, as Councilmember Keel indicated, we actually this is not a new item. This currently actually is in our current budget right now. So normally, this has, based on the direction from 2 years ago, this was put in the budget, and it has not been spent because with COVID shut things down, but we had it carried forward in the budget, and often we would just carry forward it into the, in a budget adjustment. So a couple things are, because we know we want to make sure it's at the forefront. We don't want to just kind of shuffle it in, this is what it proves. So that's why it's highlighted, and so it's unusual, but it has previously been approved and considered, as Councilmember Keel mentioned.
So right there, real quick, you're saying we actually took action and approved it?
It's in the current adopted budget.
Oh, as a budget, but not as
Not the project, but it's parking meters
okay,
are in
excuse
the
me, I just
current
want to make
budget,
sure I got that clear.
in the
Thank you.
2020 to 22 budget.
Thank you.
But from a standpoint of, and this is just something to consider, the fact that it's been in the budget has made an impact that it was a named item in our budget, has made an impact to actual retailers out on site, namely both Gallows Chicken as well as the Five Guys Burgers that is just recently announced. Both of them decided to pull the trigger on their leases because we had something noted in our budget. So there is a little bit of weight, at least, that instead of an undefined contingency from that standpoint. Doesn't mean that we're held to that, and obviously we can change it. But at least from what we've seen out there, there is some benefit to having a named item as compared to just a contingency. But that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Jack. All right, so at this point, unless I hear some strong objections, we're moving it into the contingency. We'll have a discussion about it soon, and we'll move on to our next item. So,
Mayor?
sorry.
Yeah. Mr. Eklund just noted that 2 businesses came forward because it was noted in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
What is the harm of having it noted, and then if we change our mind, we'll refund it somewhere else?
In a lot of ways, it's 6 to 1, half dozen another. It makes no
yeah.
difference either way.
Yeah, but, we
I'm
have
just
2
trying
business-
to rather just recognize the conversation. I've had a number of council members say, I'm not that happy with where we are. And so I'm just trying to also to give some preference to that. In my own mind, I think it's as good a contingency as it is in the budget as far as it's being able to move forward.
Well, I would,
Steve, can I?
as Mr. Eklund noted, name it. That would be my position, because we have 2 businesses that invested thousands of dollars in our town center because we were going to discuss it and have it in there. So I don't see what the harm in keeping it here, whether it's contingency or not. It's still the same thing.
Okay.
Steve,
So
can I
outcome,
comment on
so
that real
that's,
quick?
So
so
at
that would be
this...
my position, and it sounds
At-
like I might be in the minority, and that's
No,
fine, but I just
At
wanted to
this point, it
publicly
sounds to me
state-
like I need a vote, and I
But-
can't do that in a study session.
You can't.
So we get to push this into the next meeting then, and we can vote as to how we want to move forward with this item on the budget. So,
I relinquish my position to contingency based on all the facts and what I'm hearing, leaving it, like you said, it won't,
It doesn't
it doesn't really matter. And I agree with that. But the flavor is, it looks better if it's in a budget versus contingency list, but I understand it's the same. It's still in the budget.
So
I
does,
relinquish as well.
So just for the simplicity of this conversation, I'm fine.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Whatever works out best for tonight.
Councilmember Fleming.
Mr. Mayor, I would say I'd be fine with that with the contingent, I hate to use that term at this point, that we do have a conversation on this and a council decision before we consider this a done deal and move forward with the expenditures, because I am a little gun shy, to be quite frank, when we, and this is absolutely no, nothing against staff. I mean, you're doing your job, you're doing your due diligence. But to the council, oftentimes we put things in the budget, we forget about it, it goes on to a consent agenda, we pass it, and away we go. This is kind of a hot button item, and I think before the council allows the expenditure of those funds, there's a clear understanding that we have a study session, a conversation, and then a vote on it.
Well, thank you. I think that's clear certainly to me, and I think to staff as well. And so we'll have a study session on our options and how to move forward with parking meters and such.
So that should be a
Councilmember Wood,
budget
did you have
footnote.
something further?
I was just going to say,
There you go.
so all I wanted was the discussion. I don't care if it goes contingency or otherwise, so if you want to leave it in the budget as is, I am okay with that. I just want the discussion.
Sounds like it's in the budget as distributed. So, all right, then let's move on to our next item, and we'll look forward to scheduling, when the information is available, a study session on parking meters.
Okay, you're stuck with me again, so.
You're stuck with us again.
So this is a study session for an adjustment to the 2022 budget. The legislature provided temporary financial flexibility in 2021, which included a provision that provided cities with flexibility through 2023 to use a portion of our REIT revenue for maintenance and operations of parks and capital facilities. REIT normally can only be used for capital improvements. It can't be used for maintenance. So we are proposing, we've done the calculation because you can use the greater of 100,000 or 35% of your available funds. So we've taken a look at our budgets and done the calculation, and we can utilize $792,519 and transfer that to the street fund to help with maintenance and operations of streets in 2022. This still allows us enough money in our REIT fund to make our debt payments, to fund the projects that we currently have in the budget, and we stay within the 35% of the funds. In the memo, I've provided the piece of the forecast that shows you where those numbers came from, and then just the exhibits that would be brought forth to council. At the next meeting, we would have a public hearing and approval of that budget adjustment. That concludes my report. Have any
Questions about REIT? I think we've had a chance to actually discuss this previously. We had some thoughts, and this is where we are. All right, great. Well, thank you, Leslie. And thank you for putting that together, and thank you for highlighting this, by the way, so we do get the chance to have an open discussion about various things, such as parking. And I think that brings us up to compost. Compost procurement. Let's buy some.
This is going to be a crappy conversation.
There's jokes all around in there, right?
All right.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Lisa Patoric from the Administrative Services Department. So I'm here to talk about the compost procurement ordinance. Earlier this year, the state legislature passed House Bill 1799, which essentially relates to organic management. The purpose of the newly enacted law was to reduce landfill waste, and specifically through minimizing yard waste going into the landfill by 75% by 2030. As part of that goal, the bill amended several new chapters to existing law, one of which requires cities with populations greater than 25,000 and that provide curbside organic matter collection to do 4 things. The first is to adopt an ordinance by January 1st, 2023, that requires cities to procure composting materials for city projects related to landscaping, erosion control, street projects, and so forth. Also included in that RCW is the requirement that the city must provide an educational strategy to the community on the benefits of using compost and how the city uses such organic materials. It also encourages cities to give priority to compost producers that meet the requirement of the Department of Ecology. And finally, to begin reporting to the Department of Ecology in 2024 the number of tons of organic material diverted, the volume and the cost of compost purchased, and the sources of the compost used for city projects. So the first step before the council is to adopt such an ordinance that covers these requirements. So along with RCW 43.198.150, which outlines the requirements placed on cities, which I had just enumerated previously, there's a secondary RCW 43.19A.120, and that specifically outlines where the city may exclude the procurement of composting materials. So if the city were to conduct, if the city needed to look at purchasing compost for a particular project, but the compost couldn't be procured in time, or if the cost of purchasing compost is cost prohibitive, or if the application of the compost materials in the project itself would have a detrimental environmental impact, then cities could bypass the purchasing of compost under those specific circumstances. Just to give you an idea of how much the Parks Department, for example, uses in their landscaping project, they use currently 200 to 300 yards of wood chips for most of their projects. So if the city were to purchase compost for all of those projects, the cost impacts could be anywhere from $7,000 to approximately $10,000. There obviously will be areas where that might be cost prohibitive, so cost could be less than that. And if we're getting wood chips for free, it might not necessarily make sense to purchase composting materials for some of those projects. One of the other requirements of the RCW is that cities must find locally sourced compost. So what that requires is that priority should be given to locally sourced producers that derive their compost from municipal solid waste compost programs. So for example, UP Refuse purchases compost from LRI, which makes that material from not only University Place, but from a lot of the surrounding areas that have yard waste programs. So that would be one methodology where the city would meet the requirement should it purchase from a locally sourced vendor that does provide that LRI composting materials. Lastly, the RCW does require education to the community. So staff currently is in the very early development of an educational program. Right now, we think it might make sense to combine this composting education with the NPDES program, which is the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System program. And essentially what the NPDES program does is that it addresses water pollution, and part of that program has its own educational program. And there currently is already a composting component built in that educational program. And so after discussion with staff that currently work on the NPDES program, we would be looking at expanding and making the compost education piece of that more robust. Additionally to that, if you recall, last year, or earlier in the year, I'm sorry, the city passed the Pierce County solid waste and hazardous waste management plan. There is an entire chapter on composting in that plan. There are regular updates and amendments made to that program, and so we would also be contemplating how we can make some more UP-centric type of composting education and draft language specific to that in the overall plan that this council adopts every 10 years or so. So, in conclusion, cities must adopt an ordinance covering the requirements of both RCW 43.19A150 and RCW 43.198.120. The proposed ordinance that is in your packet covers the major applicable components required by both RCWs, and upon future adoption would put the city in compliance with these newly amended laws.
Very good. Thank you. Let's see, do we have any questions or comments? Councilor, Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa.
Just a quick one. When is that going into effect again?
The it's a law that spans from 2023 through 2024. So the council would have to adopt a composting procurement ordinance by January 1st of 2023.
Okay, so when you say 23 through 24,
so the
is
first
there like a time frame and then it ends?
No, it doesn't end, but what ends up occurring is there's a couple different requirements to this law. So, for example, the reporting of the number of composting materials that we've purchased and put out in the city, we have to begin reporting those numbers to the Department of Ecology in 2024.
So what's the purpose of mentioning 2024?
It's just a requirement written in the law of when we need to start reporting to the Department of Ecology.
But no later than that.
Correct.
Okay, so what's the consequence if we don't?
We would be in violation of the current requirement, which requires cities 25,000 or more that provide yard waste pickup to have an ordinance on the books. So I haven't looked into exactly what would happen if we didn't adopt an ordinance, but yeah, I imagine Matt, our legal advisor, could provide some insight in that.
All right, Councilmember Keel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Just very quickly, have we done any calculations on if this would save us money or if this would cost us money? You gave the wood chip example, and I'm just wondering if there's
right now it would cost us money. It's very rare for the Parks Department to use composting materials because we do use wood chips. So, based on the amount of wood chips that we currently use, if we were to switch all of that to composting, then our cost would be an additional $7,000 to $10,000. The likelihood of us doing that
a year or each project?
A year.
Okay.
Yeah, but because some of that would be cost prohibitive because we do get our materials for free, it would likely be less than that.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. This makes more sense to me tonight than I did the first time I heard it, so I appreciate that. When I look at the deadline, so you're saying by the 1st of January, which means we would have to adopt this the 1st of December, basically, at our first council meeting to meet the deadline.
Yes.
On that. And I also heard you say that there's a second RCW that says if the cost of doing this program exceeds our benefit, i.e. savings, that we don't have to do it. Is that correct?
Correct. In one of the RCWs that is referenced, there are very specific exclusions where a city does not have to purchase compost. And one of those is if it is cost prohibitive.
How is that defined?
Let me read it for you. Now, it says compost purchasing prices are not reasonable or competitive, or if the total cost of using compost is financially prohibitive. Now, financially prohibitive is not defined in the RCW itself, so that would be a determination that we would need to make.
So to use your example, if we're receiving wood chips for free, and it's now going to cost us $10,000 a year to switch over, we could say that's, in theory, based on that definition, it's cost prohibitive.
Theoretically, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay, there are, go ahead, Councilmember McCluskey.
okay. Thank you, Mayor. Also, I think in the costing, as we were talking about in the study session, is this is not clean compost that comes. It comes with weeds and other things in it. Right, so we'll have higher maintenance costs, so I think that should be included, the total cost and impact should be included in this before we consider it cost prohibitive. I think the full cost to doing this should be noted. Because, when we do wood chips, then it's a lot cleaner than the composting, and we're going to get it from, if you get it from the LRI, then, because it goes from LRI, so it's countywide, right? LRI.
Yes.
Then, so all across the county, whoever puts whatever in their yard waste gets compost, comes to University Place Refuge, where we buy it. So who knows what we're going to get in that soil and what's going to pop up, so that we will have to rectify that. And also the organic matter in the mix may not be conducive to putting it into some of our beds. It'll have to be mixed with other soil too. So that mixing is an added cost, because there's an added, procedure to that. So that's going to cost. So I would think to get the true cost of this would be beneficial, rather than just saying just the cost of the product, the byproduct.
Okay.
So that we can enact the second ordinance to save our city money.
Okay, Councilmember Belisi.
This is another example of mandates that the city has to follow that our citizens aren't aware of, and these mandates do impact our budget, as indicated by Councilmember McCluskey. I wish there was some way that when we educate our citizens on the city requirement to adhere to this state mandate, that we make it known the impact that these mandates have on us. I am not against composting by any stretch of the imagination, but the fact that it is being mandated and we have to use staff time to do the reporting that we didn't have to do before, the staff time to do the back-end maintenance to make sure that we don't get invasive weeds in our deliveries, is all cost that takes away from budget, that takes away from things that our citizens are demanding that we provide in services. It's only $10,000 to start with to buy this compost, but it's the additional cost of staff time. And once you get one mandate in, that mandate tends to grow on the state level, and before you know it, 10,000 goes to 100,000, which does have a material impact. But we are then held to the original mandate. You did it at 10,000, you can figure out how to do it at 100. So I wish there was some way that our citizens would understand that when they demand these things, that it does impact them on a local level.
Thank you, Councilmember Belisi. Before I go to Councilmember Figueroa, or excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa, so we compost at home, and we do a fair amount of it. And we're, one, careful about what we put in. Two, we wait for it to cook, and it literally does. And it actually, if it's done right, it should sanitize and neutralize those weed seeds. So it's more about quality, I think, and what they do with their process. I have no idea how good a process LRI, or whatever their proper name is.
LRI,
Yeah. I don't know what that quality is like. Like I said, I make my own. But in any case, hopefully it's good quality, but I don't know. I just bring that out. But Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa, you had something?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that even if it was good quality, I have an issue again. That's why I said, what about if we don't comply? What's the consequence? Because mandating something like this is very, I can't even explain the word, but as Councilmember Belisi mentioned, is that it is more than what the state even, I don't know what the discussion was and how they thought it would impact us or not, or the cities, but it doesn't mean, it's something that we can discuss later on as we set the legislative agenda for 23, 24, 25, but we should put it on our legislative agenda as if we agree as a council to have our legislators try to take that away. I mean, that happens all the time. And I think that this is one that we should, it sounds small, but it's a thorn. It might be a small thorn, but it still hurts. And I think that we should consider that as a legislative agenda to our legislators, that we need to have that taken out, okay?
Thank you. So with that, all this is in preparation for us to consider it over the course of the next 2 meetings. And we'll be, I believe, moving on the agenda so you can see. During the course of things, we may find out what happens if we don't, 1, meet the timeline, and 2, never meet the timeline. Those are 2 different things. Or at least meant to be. Usually nothing happens for a while, and then there's sanctions, and then those sanctions usually affect grant eligibility, is typically what happens in most things. So, but we'll see, and the city attorney can tell us more if we choose to go down that path. All right, we'll look forward to getting us on to the next agenda. Speaking of which, we have one more agenda item, too, and we get to hear about Fat Beam. And Jack is going to be covering that for us. Thank you, Jack. You're pitch hitting for us tonight. Whoops, we're out of baseball season. You're filling in. Okay.
There we go.
We did have Matt lined up, but technology is in the way of that. So thank you for stepping up.
Yep, no problem. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. As you mentioned, I'm bringing to you for study a proposed telecommunication franchise for Fat Beam LLC. So Fat Beam, they've applied for a non-exclusive franchise for the purposes of providing telecommunications services in the city of University Place, utilizing the city right-of-way. Attached in your packet is a copy of the draft agreement that's been prepared by our city attorney, Matt Kaiser. In the application from Fat Beam, they are proposing to construct fiber lines to 7 school district locations through a combination of both aerial and underground installations. And then the map of where these would be, the routing is also in the council packet as well. The services provided by this installation will primarily be for the school district. In fact, initially it'll be exclusively for that, but they do have plans that will eventually have some commercial application as well in the future they're planning. And then finally, I just want to point out that no facilities for either personal wireless services or towers or poles are anticipated to be associated with this work that they're providing. So that concludes the report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Jack. So do we have any questions? Councilmember Fleming, then Councilmember Wood, then Councilmember Keel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Did you want on that one?
And thank you, Jack, for that. My question is really brief. When you look at the layout of the proposal, majority of what they're proposing is aerial. I thought at one time we were pushing that any future cable, any future lines would be underground, not overhead. Are we changing our position on that to accommodate this, or
So
what's changed?
What we're held to is if there is a utility pole in place and there is capacity on the pole, we are required to allow that to still be aerial. Okay. But in places where there is underground, they must be underground. So they aren't going to be putting any new aerial where there's not existing overhead wires. But it is something that we are handcuffed a bit ourselves. We with the way the telecommunication laws are. So if there are already poles and aerial, we have to allow
give it to them. It doesn't quite fit our model of a cleaner city, but It is what it is then, is what I hear.
Yeah. It's about, of what they're proposing, it is about half of what they're doing, a little over half is aerial and a little half, and then it's about half and half.
Is this the map? Oh, there's more to it. Never mind.
Yeah, so they have, I think it's, it was 27,000 feet of aerial and 20,000 feet of underground. So it's, I guess, a little more aerial, but close to.
Jack, related question, which is lashing or just straight new strung wire? So,
say it again?
do they lash existing wire or do they run new strings?
How are they attaching to the poles?
Run new. Yeah, they attach to new, they'd be a new attachment, and that's where it does come into effect. There may be a location where the pole itself because they have to be so far from other ones, so there may be a location where the pole is full, I guess, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And so they'd have to go to underground, but generally, I believe when they've looked at it, there is still capacity in the route they're looking at.
Thank you. Are you done, Councilmember Fleming?
Just one last question, and that is, I'm going to presume that it's Tacoma Power that owns the poles, not the city.
Tacoma Power, there could be, and I haven't looked at each one, there are a handful that are owned by Lumen, so it's, but vast majority would be Tacoma Power.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Wood.
So, kind of a three-part question here. First one is just to help me out, because this is first time dealing with this kind of thing. To do this, if they're going underground, they're going to be digging up our roads and then, putting in new things underneath the roads, all that other stuff. Second, did they have a time frame for this proposal when they wanted to do their work? And the reason I asked that question is specifically because we're about to do a beautiful new overlay down Grandview. And I'm seeing them wanting to dig up Grandview and just, mess up this beautiful overlay. Is there a way we can, if this goes through, that we can say at least do it prior to our overlay, and which would mean getting it done before the end of winter?
We certainly can't. We do have our code has a pavement cut moratorium that after we overlay, you can't cut our pavement for over, I think it's 3 years, unless you have, it's a little more extensive. A little more extensive restoration, there's a possibility, but generally it's a prohibition. So it certainly would be financially motivating for them to do it sooner. And that's something we can reach out to them and impress upon them the importance to do it sooner as opposed to later. I'm not sure in these installations if they are proposing to go in the street. A lot of times they're in the side of the street, in the shoulders and so forth.
Something tells, but my recollection is it's in the street or easement area, not in the street, but more on the pedestrians portion.
Okay,
But we'll definitely check into that and make sure that we definitely don't want to tear up our new pavement for sure.
Or our new sidewalks, or our new anything else we're putting down. I'm just a little concerned about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. Councilmember Keel.
Great, thank you, Mayor. So Jack, they're talking about 7 locations, so, that's not anywhere near the amount of locations that the school district has. And I'm looking at the map, they've got the primary schools and then Drum, one of the intermediates, but there's another intermediate, there's the junior high, and there's the high school. Do you have any idea, are they going to come to those later on, or do they already have them? What?
Yeah, I'm not fully aware of, what they're planning from that standpoint. The hub they have is kind of centrally located for both. The one that says Technology Services Building Hub, that's going to serve both the high school and junior high. And then the other ones, basically the only thing that's not noted on here would be, is it Narrowsview? Is the only thing that wouldn't be a direct connection?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure it's something they've worked out with the school district, but the franchise would allow for them to expand to it. But I know this is their current plan.
And so, when you said non-exclusive, so which side of the house is it non-exclusive? Is it non-exclusive on their side or on our side?
It's on our, basically that they don't have exclusive rights to the right-of-way. We still have maintain our usual rights and so.
Okay, great. And the last question I have, you said that they were talking about some future expansion, like into other commercial. Are they? Is it possible residential, or businesses you're just talking about?
Right now, it's been contemplated commercial, for like commercial communication services, basically, I believe, like fiber lines,
But not
the
extending to...
franchise could allow for other, some things are generic in it, but what their current application is just the school district with the potential to expand for limited commercial use.
So they're not thinking of like taking it to people's houses then, homes?
Not that I'm aware of, at least.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. If not, I think we're ready to consider this as the next available agenda. Okay, good. And now we're going to move on to a open space designation discussion, I think. Welcome, David. Yeah, you get to help us with this one. Nice to see you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Is this on? Okay. Can you ask Linda Seas to bring up the map? Okay, there it is. Thank you. Tonight, I'm going to ask you to consider whether or not to grant or to deny or to suggest a modification to an application for what's known as a current use assessment or current use classification. The applicant is Nadine Lutas. The proposal is to place 3.86 acres of a 4.96 acre parcel into open space. And basically that means that they want to take a portion of their property and lower the amount of taxes, property taxes they pay on that by designating a portion of it as open space, and a portion of it, the remaining, would be the portion of the property where their house is located, which will be continued to be taxed at the current rate. The revised Code of Washington, Title 84, Property Taxes, provides for the reduction of property taxes to promote the preservation of open space, agriculture, and timberlands under RCW 8434. A property owner may apply for the designation on all or a portion of the property as open space, agricultural lands or timberlands by submitting an application to the county. The RCW provides two methods to provide that classification or designation. The first is by a combination of county council members, 3, and city or town council members, 3, if it is in an incorporated area. Otherwise, and in this case, the county council has already acted on this and has forwarded this to the City of University Place for a separate affirmative action where both parties either affirm the entirety of the application without modification, or both parties affirm an application with identical modifications. The process that the county goes through includes receiving the application and providing a staff report to the City Council. They make their recommendations to the City Council and forwards a copy of that to the city or town and the applicant. The council, City Council, or rather County Council, holds a public hearing and acts on an ordinance, and the applicant and city or town are notified of that. If passed, the adopted ordinance is forwarded to the city, which is the case now before you, for its review and concurrence. A cover letter explaining the process was also included in the transmittal that we received. The city affirms the application in a legislative action of their own, and then will forward the documentation of the legislative action to the clerk of the Pierce County Council. After the confirmation by the city has not been modified, the council will move forward with the application and notify the county clerk. The department sends the contract to the applicant after that. However, the city, as I said earlier, can affirm, deny, or seek a modification of the proposal. In determining whether you want to take either one of the three actions, there are provisions within the RCW for you to consider, including the resulting revenue loss or tax shift that may occur by taking that portion of the property off the regular tax rolls. And secondly, whether or not the application that they are applying for will conserve or enhance natural, cultural, or scenic resources, protect streams, stream corridors, wetlands, shorelines, etc. The granting authority, as I indicated before, may approve a part of or the whole property. In this case, the request is for a part of, and may also require that certain conditions be met, i.e. modifications, including but not limited to the granting of easements. And this is specifically, typically, for public access, for open space. Obviously, you wouldn't want public access through your agricultural lands, but for open space areas, the city can require or request a modification of the application or approval to permit public access. That being said, a condition to grant open space may not require public access on land classified for the purpose of promoting the conservation of wetlands. This is important for when I get to the end of my staff report. We do have two provisions within our municipal code, but unfortunately they only apply in development situations, not generally to anyone who may want to request a current use assessment under the RCW. As I indicated, the City Council may affirm, deny, or request a modification to the county action. The county requests any affirmation documents be received by them no later than December 1st of this year to allow the applicant to request a tax credit for the next year's property taxes. I might point out that the statute also requires that this action be no longer than 6 months, but the county has had the application for 1.5 years before they sent it to us. City staff contacted Pierce County Parks and Recreation to inquire about the future parcel for public access and the extension of the Chambers Creek Canyon Trail. They then contacted the people or the planner at the county who prepared the original staff report. And it appears that the original planner at the county Planning and Public Works Department overlooked the opportunity for public access, however, did admit that he was aware that there was surrounding property owned by the county Parks and Recreation Division, and I'm coming to why I believe that is. There was a previous county plans that included a trail through the property, but a recent amendment to the Chambers Creek Master Site Plan in 2017 omitted that trail segment. Pierce County Planning, Parks and Recreation staff indicated they are still interested in future trail access in that vicinity and possibly across that property. and indicated to me that they may even consider purchasing the property for future access, if that may be a possibility for them. The Planning and Public Works staff expressed concern regarding that condition, which I mentioned earlier, that the public access is not advisable or not allowed if the land is classified as wetlands. And there is a wetland on a portion of this property. It's not the entire property being requested, but it is a portion. And that individual, that staff member, felt that that was enough justification to make a recommendation that no public access be permitted. Also, according to that staff member who talked to the property owner opposes the public access to the property.
Sorry, David, could you speak up on that last piece?
Yeah, according to the Pierce County Planning and Public Works staff who prepared the report, the property owner is opposed.
Opposed, thank you.
To public access across the property. So with that information and background, I ask that the request that the City Council consider the proposal and direct staff to proceed with an affirmation, a denial, or a modification action that we then send back to the City Council or the County Council. And if it is denial, I'll need a justification for that. I don't think that's very common. And secondly, I would ask that the City Council consider amending the zoning code so that the provisions of RCW 8434 are applicable to non-development situations as well. I believe there is already an item on the Planning Commission's
Work plan?
that would fit into without any additional to the work plan itself.
Okay, good, thank you. Anything else? And
That'll all. That'll be all.
so, David, the conversation for tonight is to get us ready for a future resolution, I would assume, or perhaps it's an ordinance.
It was interesting that the City Council or the County Council passed it as an ordinance, but I think a resolution would be appropriate.
Okay. The County Council used an ordinance.
Yes.
Do they do everything by ordinance? I'm trying to remember, there was something odd about the county resolution process. So, okay, in any case, whatever you or our attorney can identify the best vehicle, but,
Yep.
while there's a number of questions that come up, do you know if this is done in the context of a public hearing when we consider this issue?
It indicates that that a public hearing is held by the county council, or if it were a joint type of situation, it would be before that joint group. There's no indication that the city is required to hold a
So
public
we don't
hearing.
have to do it in the hearing. Okay, that just means we can ask more questions now, I suppose, so, if we want. All right, just wanted to figure out what we were doing. And anybody have anything that so we'll have this come back to us, just want to, so, but Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm trying to wrap my head around the public benefit of this. You know, it's a tax relief act, and also the surrounding properties, not only along Chambers Creek, but also in the city of University Place, that could have the same case. So what would make this the exception that would have some sort of public benefit? You know, you're described that there's not going to be a trail that has wetlands, and if the county has decided to put a trail there, they would ask to purchase the property at that point in time. So I'm not really seeing a direct line of a public good. I can't make an exception so that people can have tax relief. I would like tax relief. In my waterfront, I have unusable property out there. I would like to get tax relief on that. But that is my property, and I pay taxes on it, and I don't expect to have a tax relief, you know, purchased it. it wouldn't have a public benefit anyway if I did. So what would be, what would benefit our citizens in the university place to provide tax relief to this specific citizen?
The county has it's interesting that you talk about the public benefit, because there is a public benefit rating system that the county uses and looks at different categories, whether it's a steep slope and it prevents people from, say, developing on a steep slope, which would then, potentially have, impacts to erosion and landslide potential. For example, protecting wetlands, protecting the wildlife corridor through there. In this case, if I could ask Linda Sees or the people to bring in a closer map to this area, or a different map. Can we have a different map? There we go. Thank you. So that shows where the unconfirmed county wetland inventory wetland is and steep slopes. So the county has determined that there are a number of benefits, public benefits, to preserving this area as open space. However, as you make a good point, there is, at your ownership, there is tidelands. Obviously, you would not be able to build on them, just as they are unable to build on this portion of the property. So what is truly the public benefit of taking this off the tax rolls and providing that as open space?
Yeah, if I can respond a little bit to that. So some might say the fact that they're taking this property that has critical areas associated with it, steep slopes and wetlands, out of any future development. Reality is it's very, very hard to develop, but in theory, it could be developed. This removes it from the potential for future development. I think there's some provision that the owner may be able to pay back taxes if they do get a deferred, but that's a whole other set of issues we don't need to get into.
I believe that's correct. If they wanted to convert it back, they'd have to pay the back tax.
Yeah. So the taxes they forgave, and if later they want to build a Walmart there, they're going to have to pay it back. Now, I'm not suggesting a Walmart belongs there. I'm just
Extreme.
Yeah.
Does that apply to subsequent owners?
Is it what?
Does that apply to subsequent owners too? So if
Yes.
somebody buys it and then wants to develop it, they'd have to pay all the back tax?
Yes.
It's perpetual, and I don't quite know how the back taxes play in the long run, but I just used that to illustrate. So,
Okay.
but I just wanted to, so some would say that's a public benefit, but anyhow. So,
She had her hand raised.
I'm sorry. Yep, please.
David, what is the tax loss to the city for those 4.3 acres?
I could not tell you exactly what the tax loss to the city is, but in the back of the staff report that the county did produce, there is a calculation of that.
Yeah, I found it in your staff
The
report.
overall property tax decrease would be $2,423.
Okay, now when I look at the aerial attachment D of the ortho map, am I interpreting this correctly, that they are not the only ones that have property on the steep slope? So we're setting precedent here that we're talking 2,500 times however many properties decide to go for tax relief on their steep slope properties. And we're still not getting any public gain here. You stated that the owner is not agreeable to having public access to it. Well, it's open space. If we're going to give something to her or to the property owner should give something to the public. Whether or not there is a designated trail through there, once you get a designated trail, people seem to always meander off of that designated trail into the public into the open space. So if you have something on the property line, chances are people are going to go in there. I'm a bit concerned about the precedent we're setting here, considering that the property owner at the time of purchase knew that there was property that was undevelopable. And we're not getting a direct public gain for it. I don't think the county did a very good job in reviewing this. They checked off boxes but didn't think holistically. When we make our recommendations for zoning changes, et cetera, we tend to look at the city as a whole and the impact it's going to have. And this has a potential for a trickle theory, particularly given economic situation and people's constantly talking about how expensive their property taxes are. They're going to start looking at ways of saving, and then all of a sudden we have a lot of open space requests coming through that can have an impact on our public safety funds. I'm not necessarily a fan of this. If the county decides to put a trail through there and the wetlands on this portion of property is insignificant and they can do it, I think then the county has a right to go to the property owner and request purchasing those 4-point whatever acres. And that goes for anybody else that has purchased property on the canyon there.
Yes.
And I think that's the way it should go. It shouldn't go through a reduction in their taxes and then no benefit to the public.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to go to Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa in just a second. David, when this comes back to us, could you, if you don't have an answer to the question I'm about to ask, the $2,423, is that the city share or is that the full reduction?
I believe that's a full reduction.
That's what I was thinking.
So we get the 6 cents per dollar.
That is right. Multiply that times 8 cents, and that's how much.
Right. It is a few pennies, and thank you, Mayor. It is a few pennies. Councilmember Belisi took the words out of my mouth. That is a precedent. Always look for precedent here, and it's not just those areas, but throughout our city, like Councilmember McCluskey's, and there are many other ones. And so I certainly believe that we cannot go in that path of because believe me, this will catch on because people want to pay less, period. The other thing is, I don't understand, if they don't want to pay taxes, they should have just offered it to the county and say, here, would you accept a donation? And if the county thought that they could use this and was a good idea, they should have accepted it. Was that ever discussed or brought up, or?
Not that I know of. I know that I talked to the Pierce County Parks and Recreation staff, and they indicated that they would be interested in, if it came down to it, potentially purchasing the property. But they were also interested in the public access to it
Right,
in
so-
one term or another. I believe if the property owner felt strong enough, they would say, I'm not selling it because I don't want any public access, and continue to
Yeah,
pay
but they
the
would sell
taxes.
it, and then it would be public access. So it's all about money, right?
They don't want it, no, they don't want the public access.
No, but
want
my
privacy.
point is, if the county says, I'll buy it from you for public, so we can provide public access, they're going to sell it.
Not
So-
if they don't want people
Well-
down there.
We don't know that.
We don't know that.
Yeah, they could easily sell it. And so, and my experience tells me that they would take the money and save the taxes, and it's a double win for them. So that's how I see in the real life of things. But I don't necessarily, I'm talking about peers, am in favor of continuing this because I just believe that my major concern is really the precedents, and I don't want to deal with that from every landowner. The other one would be, of course, is there's no public benefit. They're not going to build. I know that from looking at this, they're not going to build on that, and so why do that? If the county really needs it for public access, they can purchase it now or whenever they want to. But from my perspective, I'm not in favor of it. spending more time on this.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll have to ask ourselves, and Councilmember Wood, I'll be there in a second, but and Councilmember Fleming, I think Councilmember Wood may have you beat, at least in my observations. But what I wanted to get to is we still have this issue in front of us. We need to see if we need to find out if we are obligated to take this issue up and have an actual vote on it. And so I just want to fall short of reaching a conclusion at a study session on the issue. So if you follow me. Yeah, Councilmember Wood.
So just, I guess what I'd like to see before I vote is the overall, and this is again, what everybody else has brought up as a precedent we're setting, is how extensive is that precedent? Would this apply to every single privately held retention pond in the city, which is another issue we're dealing with? You know, I'm concerned about how far this could reach within the code of the RCW, and then the cost involved, or I would say the loss of revenue involved in taxes if everybody was to suddenly say, I don't want to do this. And so if I had a better understanding of that, and I also think if we capture that information, it'll help us make our case back to the county why this may or may not be a good idea for us. And I think we need to have that information before we just say yes or no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to be a little facetious and say, well, my application's coming in tomorrow. And,
I've got a yard that's too small to build.
you know,
It's got a tree.
I think probably the two biggest barriers I see to this proposal of what's already been made. One was setting the precedence, because it clearly will set a precedence along the creek there for that. And the other is the public good. But I also, you know, I always put on my John Desai sometimes, and when I hear $2,400 is what's going to be taken off the rolls for 4 acres of property. My property is not very far from there. I have 4 acres, as you know, and I pay 4 to 5 times that in taxes. So I'm struggling to see how we came up with $2,400. But
She's got a view up there.
oh, so do I. So, you know, I think part of it's about the money, but the other part is I think it is a Pandora's box that if we go down this path, it will trigger. And then the question is, how do we determine fairness? So those are my 10 cents.
So, thank you. Quick observation on my point. Let's see, we received this packet of material on October 14th or something like that?
Correct. They're,
And they received it when?
February 2021.
2000?
2021. February
2021. I just wanted to hear it again. Yeah.
28th, I think, Valentine's Day? No. There is it is date stamped, I believe, on the application.
Yeah, no, that's what it says in the application.
Those are
They've
one of
been
the,
about a year and a half in process, and we've been about 3 weeks, maybe 4. So, yeah. And not that the property owner nonetheless deserves a response, whatever that response might be.
February 22nd. But they would like to have a response so they can take it off next year's
Okay.
taxes.
Well, I think, Council, I think we need to check in with the city attorney a little bit on process, just how we proceed with this one, and we'll see if we can, I do think we have it slated at an upcoming agenda in the next 2 meetings. But, because we're trying to respect the property owner's desire to finally get this at least considered and get a response so they can figure out what happens in their taxes in the next year. So, what we say is whatever we're going to say, but I think it's more if we can be timely, we be timely. So, Councilmember Keel.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I am interested in hearing what our attorney says about the process, but also don't want to lose the point. I think it was Councilmember Wood talking about looking at the bigger picture of financial and.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this piece of legislation, though, has been on the books for a while. I mean, a long while. And it happens periodically, not often. And because it does carry some burden to the property owner, they have to think about this a bit. And
my
there are
second-
some potential.
Only my second in the whole time I've been here with the city.
Yeah. So there are some potential benefits to the public, but I'm not saying that that's present here. So, okay. I think with that, we may come to the end of our agenda. Certainly, we've come to the end of our scheduled time. Yeah. Despite the clock on the wall that says 10:01, we really all know it's 9:01. Yeah. Thanks.
10.
Yeah. So it just feels like 10 because, well, on Saturday it was 10 o'clock. All right. So if there's no objections, I'm going to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Adjourned.